Shoot the Breeze topic number one says Malcolm X once said, the most segregated hour in America is high noon on a Sunday. What do Black Christians have in common here again? This takes us to Twitter. Make sure you guys can see my screen. My computer has been a little slow the last few weeks, so I apologize. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so you see the kind of folks we're talking about here. This is a tweet from I Expose Racists and Pedos. It says, degenerate filth. In fact, I won't even read it. I'm just going to get right into the video. We're going to watch it. It's short. We might watch it twice, and then we'll discuss it.
The actual number of blacks who are committing murder is more than whites. Right. And whites are significantly greater,
60% compared to 13%
percentage of the population. Yeah.
So if you take that, then you took a law like Deuteronomy 21, which is a just law that God enacted through Moses. The law was that if you had a rebellious son, you have a child they're coming up into their manhood and they're rebellious, they don't listen. He lists some characteristics and even though they're disciplined, they will not turn. He says the fathers to bring them out into the town square. This is a rebellious son, and then they stone him to death. They kill him.
And an armed robber would certainly be one of those.
Oh, absolutely. Armed robber, all the ghetto
violent
culture.
Crimes.
Basically, take ghetto culture, it would describe this to a T. If you did that over 3 generations, how much violent crime would you have in the 3rd and 4th generation? Much, much less.
The actual number of blacks who are committing murder is more than
whites.
Right. And whites are significantly greater,
60% compared to 13%
percentage of the population. Yeah.
So if you take that, then you took a law like Deuteronomy 21, which is a just law that God enacted through Moses. The law was that if you had a rebellious son, you have a child they're coming up into their manhood and they're rebellious, they don't listen. He lists some characteristics and even though they're disciplined, they will not turn. He says the fathers to bring them out into the town square. This is a rebellious son, and then they stone him to death. They kill him.
And an armed robber would certainly be one of those.
Oh, absolutely. Armed robber, all the ghetto
violent
culture.
Crimes.
Basically, take ghetto culture, it would describe this to a T. If you did that over 3 generations, how much violent crime would you have in the 3rd and 4th generation? Much, much less.
The actual
Very interesting conversation there. Provide Triggers for Evolution says she thought it was a quote rather from James Baldwin. I think what it was, I think James Baldwin was recalling something Malcolm X said, which was Sunday is the most segregated hour. If I remember correctly, I think I remember James Baldwin was recalling that in one of his talks at some point. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so with that said, man, let me introduce Buana this week. Buana, how are you?
I'm good, Coco. Sorry, I apologize for my lateness, brother, but I'm here.
Nah, you're here. That's what's important. I appreciate you being here as well. Malcolm X, should be topic number one. Malcolm X once said the most segregated hour in America is high noon on a Sunday. What do Black Christians have in common here again? Like, what do Black Christians have in common with what these guys says? I know Black Steel was here first, so I'm going to throw it to Black Steel first. Black Steel, what do Black Christians really have in common with these guys who claim to be Christian?
Nothing. And I think that we have to if you're a Black person who is a Christian, you have to come to some terms with your faith as far as what you believe in. And it has always been that way. Whereas Black people use Christianity, in their words, it was a tool for their resistance and to liberate themselves from slavery. Black Christians would often quote the Exodus, talk about Moses leading the people to freedom. What they call liberation theology. But then at the same time, white Christians would use Christianity in the Bible as an excuse for slavery. There's a very famous passage in Ephesians: "Slaves, be obedient to thy masters." The Old Testament gives rules on how to treat slaves, and how long you can hold a person for bondage. Like you can hold a foreigner forever. You can only hold a Hebrew slave for a certain amount of time, so on and so forth. There's a book in the New Testament, the book of Philemon. It's basically a book about a runaway slave who the Apostle Paul tells him to return to his master now that he has converted to Christianity. So I think that there's a lot of conflicting views within the churches, but Black people have used Christianity as a way of liberation, right? There's neither slave nor free in Christ Jesus, so on and so forth. Whereas white people have used it very differently. I'm not surprised that this man is coming up with doctored stats. That's the thing about statistics; they can be used to justify um, anything and everything, whatever they want to do. So he's quoting the oft-cited point about Black people, which are 13% of the U.S. population, being responsible for the majority of the crime, and specifically murder, which is simply not true, because the 13% includes women and children also. It's really a very small percentage. But also, too, what they leave out of that fact is that not only if Black people are the majority of the people committing the murder, Black people are also the majority of murder victims, right? But then also, too, when he's talking about the 13% of people committing the crime, what he's referring to is arrests. He's referring to Black people getting arrested a great deal. But Black people also make up over 50% of exonerations. So what he's quoting, the stats he's quoting, is not so much the fact that Black people are responsible for murders, but we're the most who are arrested, right? Every arrest does not result in a conviction. But they're using these statistics as a way to justify violence against Black people, what he called God's perfect law, right? Stoning people to death. Basically comparing Black people to unruly children. And the white people are their parents, supposed to get them in line. When we were on this planet long before they were. So it's always funny to me when white people want to quote these statistics about crime and criminality as if school shootings are rare. The majority of people out here shooting up the school and killing the babies is white people. The majority of people molesting the kids is white people. The majority of people who have child pornography is white people. The majority of people who die from drug overdoses is white people. So all of this criminality and whatnot that Black people are so responsible for, but yet they'll ignore their crimes, as a way to point their bloody fingers toward us. So if we're going by his logic, Black people, who are the parents, we've been around longer than them, should have the right to stone white people, because they're the ones who are out here committing mass genocide, destroying the environment. The list of their crimes goes on and on, but they'll never flip it onto what they do. It's just really just a justification for their savagery, right? And the religion has always been a way to justify, their savagery. It's like when remember Ani talked about the asili, or the germ seed of European culture. Christianity is not a European religion, but Christianity was tailored to fit the European asili, right? Their worldview, right? So their general worldview, the way they view society, the religion was formatted to fit them, their world, to fit them, not the other way around. They didn't change themselves; they changed the religion, right? So this is just nonsense he's talking about. But Black Christians don't really have anything. This is something that a lot of them don't want to come to terms with. And they will argue that this has nothing to do with Christianity. Jesus never taught that, so on and so forth, right? And they'll overlook all the passages in the Bible that supports slavery, right? They'll ignore the things in the Bible that talk about Black people. In the Song of Solomon, the woman says she's beautiful, she is Black, but beautiful. Like, I'm Black, but I'm pretty too. Like, what the fuck? But they'll gloss over that, that type of stuff in the biblical record, because they believe it. So Black Christians don't really have anything. But I think what you'll find there are some Black Christians who may be misguided enough to believe and to follow this type of nonsense, to think that this is something worth talking about. And I've seen, I know some people who are devoutly religious who fall into that trap. They're the ones who were saying, "Oh, Charlie Kirk didn't hurt anyone," all the other stuff. That was kind of their thing. So I could definitely see where somebody who might be too deep in, to follow this to its natural conclusion. I'll let Bwana speak. Thank you.
Good stuff, Black Steel. Yeah, I was going to address that whole thing of them being the parents too as a follow-up. But in the meantime, let me hear from Bwana, and if there's still an opportunity, I'll follow up with that parents of the black race thing. But Bwana, what say you?
Yeah, me personally, Coco, I think that this conversation is a staged conversation, and it's completely what they say in bad faith. If you and they're trying to humanize a very racialized conversation. If you are trying to have a conversation like this, talking about groups of people, why not invite a person like Black Steel in the room and see whether that idea would fare well in the marketplace of ideas? And so, because the comments that's being made is going unchallenged. It's a completely subjective conversation. It's not an objective conversation. So but even though they're talking with calm voices, it would give you the impression that that what they are saying is rationally sound and commonsensical, because no one is there, no other person is in the room to refute any ideas that they quoting, and they use statistics. And since most people don't know statistics, the statistics can be manipulated completely and taken out of context. They use that as a barometer of truth telling. Put the statistic out there. But if let's just say, I'm going to tackle the question in a minute, but let's just say, even if we use the statistics of murder, as Black Steel say, Black men, they're talking about arrests. They're not talking about the people who are committing an actual act of murder itself. To be charged with a crime is not the same thing as to be convicted of a crime. These are two different things. So if you look at the arrest record, of course, may see a disproportionate amount of people arrested for murder. But what they're leaving out of the conversation too, when you deal with statistics, as Black Steel suggested, is the amount of men, disproportionately Black men, let out of prison after 30, 40, 50 years, where the state have to pay individuals into the millions of dollars for accusations levied against Black men who have been charged with murder and who was convicted of murder, only to find 10 decades later that these people were innocent. There's no mention of that conversation, and it's a disproportionate amount of Black men who have been exonerated. No conversation about that. But in terms of the question itself, when for this prompt, when you say, what do Black Christians have in common? I personally think, in particular to the Western people in the Western world, it's tradition. It's tradition. They've been doing it since we get here. This whole idea and notion of church, it's a westernized tradition on Sundays. This is what the Western man does in the West, including the slave and the slave owners. Including the slave. So it's tradition. That's what they have in common. It's a traditional act that westernized people do, even in the Caribbean and even in Africa, because they've been colonized by these kinds of people. So it's a tradition, number one. Number two, I would say the whole savior complex. Now, people may get frustrated in saying this, but if you go throughout the Black churches in much of the Christian world, you will see the same that white handsome guy with the straight nose and the long hippie hair and stuff like that. That has been consistent. So the white Christians see the savior as they see themselves as well, because they see themselves as saviors of the world. But unfortunately, the Black Christian man does too. He may deny that and say God has no color. He may deny that and say, well, we don't see things like that anymore. That's an old part. But the reality is, it's a reason why it's a reason why black women in the Western world have blonde hair. It's a reason why they act out the things that they do. They want to get closer and closer to their Lord and Savior. That savior complex is still in the minds of many people. So that is another thing they have in common. That white savior is embedded in the minds of many Christian people. And even non-Christian people, if I really being honest. But that is still there, and that is a challenge that the black Christians have yet to overcome. So these two things, I believe, that the white Christians and the black Christians have in common in the Western world.
I appreciate that, Buana. This gives me an opportunity to say something too. You know, when I look at when I think about shoot the breeze and things like that, I think about it should be to challenge whatever status quo our people find themselves in. Not to, and this is no diss to anyone, this is no knock on anyone, but this is why I kind of don't believe in you got to meet people where they are. Because how long are you going to be in this stupor? How long are you going to hear, as a black Christian, how long are you going to hear that and know to yourself that you only have this religion because it was beaten into your ancestors? Forget about that whole Ethiopian Bible, all that BS. How long are you going to follow this stuff? You know, I think about my Rastafarian brothers. How long are you going to keep beating the drum to the Judeo-Christian Bible and Judeo-Christian principles? You know, I used to work in I think I told you all this before, but I'll say it again. I used to work in a rodent lab. I used to do research in a rodent lab years ago. And one of the things I learned that's interesting is if you forget the cage of a rat or a mouse partially open overnight, that animal will come out the cage. And you might think to yourself, well, shit, once that animal gets out that cage, they're going to run to all corners of this lab and we'll never find them again. And no, you know where those animals reside after they get out the cage? Right somewhere around the cage. So it's like you get out of a thing, but did you really get out of a thing? Right? Even in consciousness, you still got people who are conscious Christians and all that. You got out of a thing, but did you really get out of a thing? So that's one of the things I want us to really consider here when we do shoot the breeze. And it's not just with this topic. Like I can hear now someone say we beating up on Christians. It's not just this. It's Islam. It's language. It's language too. This notion, it came up last week that we have these Africans who speak French and Spanish, and we gotta, you've been doing this long enough now. You support we got to get out of this stuff now. It's time that we start making the moves to get out of this. And so a topic like this, I think, is a good one in the sense of I want people to pause who claim this stuff, like Buana just outlined and Black Steel. Like you have this white savior in common with these people. Why do you do that? Why are you doing that? What benefit is it for you to follow in this shit that these guys are talking about? And to Buana's point, these guys don't have anyone in the room to counter. Of course they don't. They damn sure ain't gonna have one of us in the room. They damn sure ain't gonna have Black Steel in the room, who's gonna tear all that shit to pieces that they're talking about. So this is a conversation really for their people that we happen to capture, right? Because it's on social media, right? And we happen to capture it, but we have to start using this stuff to tell our people, man, hey, you have to get out of that. And if you're worrying about something to fall into, go study your West African ancestors, man. There's a spirituality to go fall your ass right into. You know what I mean? But let's talk about it. I know Black Steel touched on it. What is this paternalism about from white folks? And what's the message we want to get out to Black folks about getting out from under this paternalism? This is this thing of the father takes the child out into the square and stone him and all that kind of shit. Like Black Steel said, and we are the fathers. We should be stoning you assholes. But what is it about these white folks and their paternalism? And as Buana has said in the past, our going along with it. What's that about? Buana, what say
you? Explain that. Rephrase the question, Coco. Rephrase it for me, because I don't know. I won't be clear on what the question is.
Yeah, no. The video talks about they speak of. In fact, if you need me to play it again, I'll play it again. But in the video,
yes,
they talk about.
I didn't catch it at all. I didn't catch it at all.
Oh, you didn't catch the video? Oh, no. Hold on, man. Let me play it again so that we all on the same page. Hold on a second.
Number of blacks who are committing murder is the actual number of blacks who are committing murder is more than whites. Right. And whites are significantly greater,
60% compared to 13%
percentage of the population. Yeah.
So if you take that, and then you took a law like Deuteronomy 21, which is a just law that God enacted through Moses. The law was that if you had a rebellious son, you have a child they're coming up into their manhood and they're rebellious, they don't listen. He lists some characteristics and even though they're disciplined, they will not turn. He says the fathers to bring them out into the town square. This is a rebellious son, and then they stone him to death. They kill him.
And an armed robber would certainly be one of those.
Oh, absolutely. Armed robber, all the ghetto
violent
culture.
crimes.
Basically, take ghetto culture, it would describe this to a T. If you did that over 3 generations, how much violent crime would you have in the 3rd and 4th generation? Much, much less.
The actual.
Yeah, so that's the full context of the prompt. Whereas you see, they start talking about, they're using biblical code, but talking about the father takes the son up to the square and how, ghetto culture, which is just code for black people, right? We supposed to, basically, they're saying they're supposed to take them out into the square and start exterminating us. And what would you have after 2 and 3 generations? So that's what I was referring to, Buana. That paternalism, where do you think that comes from in them? And why do we
I know. Yes, I know. See, what this guy, this is the reason why I say read both sides, study as much as you can about the world. I read a book by this guy named Thomas Sowell. Okay, I know Black Steel doesn't like Thomas Sowell, but Thomas Sowell wrote a book called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. In that book, he speaks mainly of the traditions of cracker culture, redneck culture. And what happened is, what his argument in the book is, that a lot of the culture we see today is connected from the rednecks coming from some of the savage places in the UK and Ireland, Scotland, going to the southern plantations, and the blacks in them areas learn from who is around them and lording over them for many, many years. So when you talk about this paternalistic culture, ghetto culture, you're really talking about redneck culture. And if you want to kill someone, you don't start with the children, you start with the parents. So in fact, the rank and file, people don't understand these things because they just label this thing as ghetto culture. But ghetto culture is just redneck culture. That's what they get from the hills or where they came from and brought it to the West. That's where that comes from. And that was his argument in the book. I don't know if people really buy into that. But if to say that to your audience, you're really cutting 99% of my God. Because the Hatfield and McCoys, well, who they used to talk about, the Hatfield and McCoys in some areas and their ideas of disrespect and all these other, it is directly linked to that. That's where that came from. So if you kill the black culture, you're really killing yourself. You're really killing yourself. And I feel like there's a lot of projecting that goes on. You project off onto other groups. Black people in America, the Jews, certain groups have always been scapegoated for whatever reason. So you're trying to scapegoat all the ills of what you put into these people off onto everyone, off onto other people. But it's really about you. It's an internal thing. And these white guys will never accept that. But it is what it is. You know, I think that it's a challenge, but I think that it's a solvable challenge. I think that with people like Black Steel teaching the white kids every week, hopefully he distributes some of this nonsense.
Funny enough, thank you for that, Buana. But funny enough, you know, and I'm going to ask Black Steel in a second, but a lot of black folks reject that Thomas Sowell stuff about cracker culture coming from these poor whites and stuff like that. But I will say one of the reasons why I think it's somewhat feasible is when you study like Garvey, for example. Garvey's preaching patterns, the way his cadences and stuff, he got it from a white guy. He got it from a white minister. I think there was a time when people got a lot of shit from them. So that's the only reason why I think it's a little bit feasible, but a lot of black folks push back against what Thomas Sowell says. The matron says, "Greetings, everyone. Sorry I'm late." Matron, you're not late. You're right on time, man. I appreciate you being here. BBN, Black Business Network, that's Brother Bakari, says, "I don't like Sowell either. He claims that we have no culture connection to Africa. He claims all of our culture comes from white people, but he refused to debate it." Yeah, very interesting. Black Steel, I know you touched on the paternalism aspect a little bit earlier. What else would you like to add? And would you like to speak on Thomas Sowell and his idea of cracker culture, black culture coming from poor whites?
The less said about Sowell, the better. All right. I can't stand that guy. His methodology and his research is just completely ass backwards. He goes out of his way. I mean, he really goes out of his way to just ignore racism. But what this man is saying, he's calling for genocide, basically, right? He's talking about eliminating the people over 3-4 generations. He's calling for genocide. He wants to have a mass slaughter of African people, right? And he wants to justify it as they're the ones who are committing crime. So that's all he's doing. He's literally calling. It's genocidal talk. You know, he's referencing the Old Testament, which is actually mentioned genocide several times in the Bible. You know, we could talk about that before, but yeah, he's really talking about genocide is what he's referring to. And he just wants to use the Bible as a justification for that, because you never, and I mean, you would never hear him say anything like that about dealing with school shooters, right? All these white women raising these teenage boys to grow up and hate everybody. You know, he would never say we should, wipe them out by using God's perfect law given to Moses. He would never mention that. So he's really just a racist, you know. I don't think what he says has any. He's just a racist. He looks like a racist. He looks like he would burn a cross in your yard. Truth be told, I mean, what's that in the background? Some sort of European goddess. He looks like a fascist too. So, just overall, this guy here is just, he's full of it, and he's referring to genocide in a nice way, trying to say it's God's will, but he's really referring to murdering mass amounts of people to so-called get crime down, right? That's the justification. And well, back in the day, used to lynch black people, hang us from trees, set us on fire, cut off our genitals, and mutilate us, and every type of horrible torture they could do to black people. And they would do that as a way, as they said, protecting the virtue of white women. That was their excuse. If a black person raped a white woman, they would lynch him. Or if a black person brushed up against a white woman too hard, he had too much bass in his voice when he told a white bitch good morning, they want to string you up from a tree. But in reality, if we look at the real reasons for lynching, it was really to reinforce the racial order that existed at the time. If a black person was becoming too successful or he had too much pride in himself, the lynching was a way. It's a public murder. It's done in public. It's done in front of your whole community to let you know how powerless you are. That's what this man is referring to. He wants to bring back genocide, lynching. And this excuse, instead of protecting the virtue of the white woman, in reality, it's a way to protect us from the burgeoning crime rates. Even though if you go look at the numbers, crime is down. Crime has been steadily decreasing. Over the last 20 years, crime rates have dropped significantly. And then on top of that, these people who claim to be so focused on eliminating crime, but they don't want to ever deal with the true sources of the causes of crime. Crime is an effect. It's an effect of poverty. It's an effect of inequality. It's an effect of no no social systems being put in place. That's why people commit crime. Yeah, you're gonna find a few people that are just, you're gonna find a few serial killers here and there. You're gonna find a few ne'er-do-wells. But the true root of criminality comes from impoverishment. And they know that. White people know this. They were also, we know in our history, when European immigrants came to America, they were the main ones committing crime. Everybody here has heard of the paddy wagon, right? They police lock people up in the paddy wagon. That came from Irish people. You call Irish people paddies for St. Patrick, right? So the paddy wagons, when they would get Irish people and lock them up. So the Irish in America were synonymous with criminality. But what happened is that they made a space for them within the large American system. They gave them land out west. They incorporated into the fire department, then the police department. They were basically assimilated into American culture. And all of a sudden, they're no longer criminalized. Not to say these people don't commit crime, because we know they do. Every time you look at the movie or a TV show, you got some white person group glorifying crime. Goodfellas, Carlito's Way, Scarface, The Sopranos. It's all this white criminality. They make movies about it and win Academy Awards for it. But let a black person steal from a grocery store. Let a black person steal a car. You see, it's retarded. Go ahead, Juan. I'm gonna cut you off. I'm talking.
And black steel, it's always street crime. And I would only remind these guys that child molestation is a crime too. The last time I checked, having intercourse with animals is also a crime too. These are numbers where you see a disproportionate a number of people from coming from their side. It's so skewed. It's so skewed. They don't never talk about that. That is also a crime. Child trafficking. That is also a crime too. So when you talk about crime and criminality, don't just resort to small street crime. Let's extend it to the greater world and talk about crimes that we consider to be heinous as well. Another thing too, because I want to get back to this thing of lynching, this punishment. There's a feature in the lynching that these guys never mention, and I never knew this prior to reading a particular book. The after lynchings, the white men used to cut off the penises of black men and eat them. And that's a weird thing. That's very strange because you're punishing people and then you're cutting off their nether parts and storing them in jars and eventually consuming them. These are things that the Western world and white male don't like to talk about. The extent of what your punishment is. If you punishing them and then afterwards you consuming them, psychologically something is going on. Something is off in this picture. So I just, like I say, I think that there should be objectivity in a room like this. You invite a black American person in the room to be able to have a real dialogue. But like Black Steel says, this is just a stage event to pilfer their racism. It's really all about that. And they're doing it in a very calm, a sophisticated way. But we know about scientific racism, well-dressed, well-meaning, very wealthy men committing heinous acts and having ridiculous philosophies, doing it and say, well, we are educated and this is what this is what we have for you black people right here. We're gonna lobotomize you. We're gonna give you a vasectomy so you won't procreate. It's all genocide. A nice version of genocidal talk, but I agree with you, Black Steel, completely, brother.
Appreciate that, Buana. Yeah, the caveat, and I agree with Black Steel too. The caveat is that they would say those are non-violent crimes. This is what they would say versus apparently ghetto culture is violent crime. That's how they would try to get around it. But what they don't do, as one of the people under the post mentioned, They don't talk about the history of violent crime. The people looking just like this guy on screen carried out for hundreds of years and still carrying out in some form or fashion right now. That's the problem with this whole conversation. But again, the idea is, why would a person who's black, who says they're Christian, why would they remain under this banner when they could clearly see and hear the same things we see and hear? Why are you staying? And I know you say tradition, but traditions are broken all the time, you know. But with that said, let's welcome in Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari, how are you this week?
I'm good, man. What's going on? What's going on to the panel, to the chat? You had sent me that, and I heard them talking about it. But for me, shit, that's just how I believe. You know what? That's what they believe. They want to kill black people, and they had an opportunity to talk about it. Uh, I don't give a damn about them folks. But you're right. The history of everything that they have done, that their whole culture has been crime, rape and rob and kill. That's been their whole culture. But what they have uh done, and I heard Bawana say sophisticated racism, what they have done, they have taught black people that black people are the problem. And black people take black people out, because if you hear people talk, who's it? Black people ops is always somebody black. So we follow their lead in every way, with the exception of, we can go back to last week when everybody thought it was okay to publicly ish on black women and try to put all black women in one box. You never hear them ishing on the white women that raise these damn mass murderers. You never hear them doing that. So we, because I don't like to use this word, but I don't use this term. I have my reasons why people don't agree, but that's okay. But for the sake of this, I'm going to use it. So, in essence, black people have become just as great. A lot of black people have become just as great white supremacists as these white people here, because they're not issuing on their own people publicly, talking about how bad they are and they are the problem. They are clearly saying we are the problem. So then when we get a mic and put a mic in our hand and we can talk and people can hear it, we're our problem. We are the N-word. Our black women is our problem. And these YNs and everything else is our problem. Not saying that we don't have any problems, but we tend to do it publicly. So we, in essence, and I'm saying we, and I know all of us don't do it, but we, in essence, follow their lead. We follow their lead. We feel about ourselves the way they feel about us. I asked a question one time. I was on Kofi panel. Bawana heard it. I say, what's the identity? Because everybody say we're in an identity crisis. I say, we're not in an identity crisis. We have chosen, I don't use this word, but we have chosen the worst thing on earth. What the white supremacists did, what these people did to our ancestors, would lynch them and rob them and rape them, and the last word they would hear would be the N word. Now we have chosen it. A lot of us have chosen it to be our identity. So we, in essence, have followed their lead. So when we talk bad about them, right? We don't have to go publicly and talk about us, but we have to look at ourselves and like, why? If it's not okay for them to do it, it shouldn't be okay for us to do it. See, because once we get to the point where it's not okay for us to do it, it won't be okay for them to do it. They're okay with it now, because then the roles reverse. They hear us talking about it publicly. So they ain't gonna say nothing. Shit,
Brother Bakari.
oh, wait, but why I ain't cut you off? Y'all don't spoke. I'm gonna let you speak. I ain't gonna be on too much long. But in essence, right? So the lunatic in office, his biographer, what did he say the black man problem is? Oh, the loudmouth black woman. I wonder where they get that from. So in essence, we became right, but then they can follow and they can say this stuff publicly because we do it. We are taking lead from them. When you think about it, you gonna understand what I'm saying. Now you can go with one.
Okay, so just consider this, Brother Bakari, because you say that uh, the white man don't ish on his woman publicly, and I would say consider. If you watch any Hollywood movie, in particular horror movies, the white man has killed his woman in the movie all the time. You know what I mean? He publicly is murder her, or she is. What happened in the horror movie? The white woman screams. She ran in the forest. She falls down, and then he murders her. I mean, this is a standard modus operandi of any Hollywood film, horror film you ever could. He always murdering his woman on film, bro. Publicly, he shows you what he thinks about her because he's always murdering her. You know, so I don't know. I would say that, like you say, I would agree that we take a lot of us, not all of us, take the lead of the white man, in particular with how we perceive our women as well. Because they since they've been doing it in Hollywood for years, and we follow that up with our ideas of misandry, well, whatever the word is, but we follow that with ideas of female disgust and hatred as well. So I agree with that point of we parrot a lot of their ideas as well. I agree with that.
Okay, but for the record,
Any
I
other?
want you to know, I didn't just say how I wouldn't just I used a woman for an example, but I was talking about how we see each other and treat ourselves. We see each other and think about ourselves the way they are talking about a lot of time. I mean, I'm saying we, of course, it's not nobody on this panel, nobody in the chat. I'm saying we because I'm just not separating myself, right? I'm not separating nobody because I'm saying we as a people. But that's how we see ourselves a lot of the time. The thing, and then that's what we say about ourselves. So, am I okay with what they're saying? Now, that's how they feel. No, I'm not okay with it, But I've been preparing for this. I've been mentally and all that preparing for this my whole life. So, in the time, it's just about here. Don't nobody really want it to happen because it's it's scary. But everything they're talking about, they want to do to us. Shit, we can do to them. It's just that simple.
So let me couple things. It's no surprise to me when a black person has repeats a lot of these racist views. I'm not saying it's right, but I mean, is it any wonder the whole world from the time you're born is basically telling you niggas ain't shit? I mean, it's so common now. People don't even realize they're saying it. But we live in an anti-black world, an anti-black society. It's no wonder that black people have internalized these viewpoints that the white races hold about us. You know, and it's everywhere. It takes a strong force of will to combat that. But to your point, why do black people still hold to this religion of white people? A lot of times it's tradition. A lot of us, that's all we know. Um, you grew up going to church. You grew up going to church at your grandma's house, and Sunday school and things like that. That's what you know. So it's normal. I think in the newer generations, right, we're starting to see less and less people adhering to the religion. And I've noticed that just dealing with younger people. You don't see as many people, young people going to church or being raised and singing. I mean, you can tell that just look at the music situation. A lot of our great singers, they got their music training from the church. That's why the R&B is so bad now. So I think we're seeing less of that, less church attendance, more people who are tending to become, if not agnostic, or looking into atheism or looking into traditional African religions. You're starting to see that more. But I say that just to say that we black people who believe in Christianity, it's been 400 years. It's a hard. I'm not saying it's impossible. It needs to be done. We need to question this religion, because the religion of Christianity, again, Christianity was in Africa before it was in Europe. But the Christianity that most black people in the United, especially the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere, believe in is straight Protestantism, Calvinism, Episcopalian, Baptist, all that other stuff. That's what black people have um, internalized. That's what we have to deal with. And we got to come to terms with it. What does that mean? We're going to lose a lot of people when we come to terms with that, because that religion is so deeply ingrained, because they connect religion with morality, right? You can't live a good life without God. You're nothing without God, they say. Unless you have God in your life, you're nobody. So these people are coming from mothers and fathers and grandfathers and everything else who are basically telling them these things, that you need religion, you need God in your life. And again, they don't connect it with the way we connect it with the history of Christianity. You know how many people don't know nothing about the history of Christianity? Most Christians don't read their Bible. That's Black Christians and white Christians. They don't know what we're talking about. They don't understand the thing. They would swear up and down, I'm doing this because I want to, because it's my own free will. They have no idea the history of Christianity, how Black people became Christian through slavery. They don't know, and they don't want to know. It's a lot of ignorance that is going on in society. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. There's a lot of unpleasant, uncomfortable realities that come from our adherence to Christianity and Islam and the other Abrahamic religions. It's and you got people like this. You find yourself on the same faith as a Klan member, which this guy basically is. He may never call himself a Klan member, but he's sitting up here talking about eliminating Black people for 20, 30 years. He's a Klan member. That's all he is. And that's all what he wants to do is genocide the Black race. And he wants to use the crime stats to justify it. But it's no wonder that so many of us have trouble releasing this Christianity and religious belief, because that's what we were brought up in. You went to church with your grandma. She had you singing in the choir. You had put on for the Christmas play. We don't associate it with the history, because we don't know the history. All we know is the good, happy memories. And then when you fall on tough times, it does give you some comfort. You have the Lord looking out for you. But we don't connect the history and connect the dots. And I think that's probably why it's not taught the way it needs to be taught as African people. So I'll leave it there.
Black Steel. If you connecting Christianity with morality, right? The question now becomes, okay, so without Christianity, there's no morality. So when the slaves was brought in, didn't know Christianity, they were immoral people. Had to have been. So to moralize them, it's really to moralize them, you have to impose your ideas of morality on them vis-a-vis Christianity. So thank God for slavery, because it got us from an immoral state to a currently a moral state. That's one thing. Another thing too
You
is
get it. You get it. You're absolutely right.
oh yeah, yeah. Another thing is that another thing is, yes, I do see a falling away with the younger people in terms of the traditionalism, what they've been practicing for a long time. Not only with Christianity, with other modes of human activity. There is a slow falling away from the fundamental institutions that they grew up with. My question becomes, what is it going to get replaced with? Now you say that there are many people who are turning to African traditional religions, which is fine. But I am curious to know, since we living in the Western world, uh, first of all, is African traditionalism practiced in the Western world going to be effective for the advancement of Black people currently? And if you say no, what do you replace that with? Which will, in terms of what will be effective in us advancing ourselves as a people going forward in this part of the world? You understand my question, or no?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think what we can organize it with. I mean, we have really. I've always say shared struggle, right? We are oppressed because we are African people, and it is that shared struggle that unites us. We're not going to see eye to eye on everything. We're not going to see eye to eye on, they have different beliefs, even speak the same language, but we do have a shared struggle, a shared condition based on our Blackness. Some people feel that's not enough. I don't know. Garvey thought it was enough. Malcolm thought it was enough. I think that that's something that we have that shared struggle. But another thing too, and this is, I guess, part of the issue with the religion, is that a lot of people believe that the struggle is divinely ordained, right? black people was, like you said, one, that black people were savages. We didn't have God. We didn't know anything about God or whatnot. And so our oppression is done as a way to bring us to our Savior. And so in a way, it justifies the dehumanization of African people because we were savages, you know. We were, the man who wrote Amazing Grace, he was a slave, he wrote it on a slave ship. You know, he's a wretch like he was. You know, he says he repented of his sin, but how many Africans did he free? But he talks about, but again, this was understood back then, and it was a necessary good. We were the children of Ham. Our enslavement was ordained to bring us to the gospel. You know, we talking about eating people, right? Cannibalism was the justification that the Spanish used to enslave the natives of the Caribbean. Oh, the Caribs are cannibals and so on and so forth, and they need to be brought to the light of Christ. And meanwhile, here we are learning about them cutting out black people's penises and eating them during lynchings. Who's the cannibal? It's always, you know, again, I think that shared struggle should be enough to unite us. We're all, no matter what you believe in, you know, whether you're Brazilian or you're from Latin America, we go through the things we go through because we're black, right? And we are surrounded by white supremacists who want to reinforce and control the world, and they mean to do so by our bodies. So I would say just that's my thoughts on that.
Y'all bear with me. My computer is sluggish again. I was supposed to clear up some space and I forgot to do it during the week. But I know Brother Bakari had to step down. He said he'll be back. Is there any last thoughts on this problem before we go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 2? All right, good discussion, fellas. Let's get right into